Welcome to Conversations on the Coast, San Francisco's premier author interview program. And today it's just great to have back on the show Ron Chernow, author of Alexander Hamilton. And I just want to welcome you. I'm so happy to see you again.
I'm amazed you have me back for round two. Thank you, Jim.
Well, the only reason I'm doing this is because, frankly, I love the book.
Thank you.
And I think it's a book that more and more people should read. And it comes in at a bargain price compared to the hardcover. And it comes in with more praise than you can shake a stick at. And David McCullough, who had a fair success with a book called John Adams, calls it grand-scale biography at its best, thorough, insightful, consistently fair, and superbly written, a genuinely great book. So, and unless you people out there have forgotten, this book has been a bestseller for the New York Times, Publishers Weekly, named by the New York Times one of the 10 best books of the year, widely featured in national broadcast programs on NBC, CBS, CNN, Fox News, NPR, Conversations on the Coast, and among others. Recognized by over 20 publications as one of the most notable books of the year. That's Ron Chernow's Alexander Hamilton. That's great.
No, I've been so delighted by the reception, because Hamilton was such a controversial figure historically. I had expected, in going around the country lecturing about the book, I'd expected to encounter much more antagonism. People have really opened themselves up to this fresh interpretation, whether that's because my book is convincing or whether that's because they're historically illiterate in the first place. I don't really know, but that's right. It's very gratifying, whatever the reason.
So you've not gotten any bad notices, so to speak, from academia?
Not really.
That's where I would expect it might come because of the different way that you look at Hamilton compared to others.
It's true. As a general rule, most popular historians, as the academic reviews start to run, the tone turns decidedly negative. Whether it's because I've been a zealous researcher, I'm not quite sure, but I have actually gotten as good reviews from the academics as from the more general reviewers.
That's great. Now, one of the things you said to me when we first got together off air is that you feel that you've not been off tour since the darn thing came out, which leads to the question, is there any horrible or humorous anecdote that you might want to share from your trekking around the country?
No, probably the most interesting thing that happened as I went around doing a lot of appearances is that, unlike, let's say, the Jefferson family, there was no Hamilton Family Association. I searched for them when I was researching the book. As I started going around the country, invariably when I would be doing a signing, there would be one person at the end standing alone in the corner, waiting till everyone else in the room had left, and pointing to Hamilton's picture.
That's either a great fan
or someone who's stalking him.
Yeah.
And then the person would point to the picture of Hamilton on the cover and tap it and say, I'm descended from him. I began putting these Hamilton descendants in touch with each other, so that by the time the 200th anniversary of the duel was celebrated in July 2004, there were about 60 or 70 direct Hamilton descendants who now have a Hamilton.
Were they over in Weehawken?
Over in Weehawken. Yeah, we had actually 1,500 people who were crazy enough to stand in 90-degree sun for 2 hours watching a reenactment of the duel. So I'm not the only fanatic on this subject.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah. One of the things that's come out with the reviews is that they realize there are so many ways to really look at what you've done, or look at Alexander Hamilton. For example, the New York Times book review in a cover review, congratulations, said, rich uncle of his country, the architect of American economic might. That's Alexander Hamilton. That is a way to get at him, isn't it?
No, I think so. I mean, this man really single-handedly creates the economic and financial system. I'll tell you something interesting. When I was researching the book, I called up the archivist at the New York Stock Exchange and said, tell me what stocks and bonds are traded on Wall Street when Hamilton was the first Treasury Secretary. He said there were 5 issues. There were 3 issues of Treasury securities, all created by Hamilton. There was the stock of the Bank of New York, first private bank, created by Hamilton. There was the stock of the Bank of the United States, our first central bank, created by Hamilton. So Hamilton had created every single stock and bond being traded on Wall Street. So this is really the beginning.
This sounds like a mogul to me, among his many other talents.
Mogul, except that he had remarkably little interest in feathering his own nest. He wanted to make the country rich. He did not make himself very rich.
You know, there isn't any doubt Alexander Hamilton captures the man, the political times, the controversy. But Ron Chernow goes further, deep into Hamilton's personal life. The story of his eldest son is a case in point. Just listen.
You're listening to Conversations on the Coast with Jim Foster. Now you can find this program on iTunes, SoundCloud, and all your favorite digital outlets. Follow the show on Twitter at JimFosterCoc and email jimfostercoc@gmail.com.
This is Conversations on the Coast. I'm Jim Foster. With me today, again, Ron Chernow, to talk more about Alexander Hamilton, now available in paperback and published by Penguin Books. My goodness gracious, we didn't say that at the start.
Shame on us.
Oh, dear me. Oh, for crying out loud. Well, one of the things that the New York Times Book Review said about Alexander Hamilton is there is no Hamilton monument in Washington, but at least we now have Ron Chernow's moving and masterly Alexander Hamilton, which is by far the best biography ever written about the man. Why isn't there a monument? He's done all these things. He created our economy. He created our banking system. He was influential in establishing the court, the Supreme Court. No monument. Jefferson's been killing him all this time?
Well, you know, partly Hamilton had an unusual knack for making friends. He had an equally unusual knack for making enemies. And when I say that his main enemies were John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, James Monroe, I'll even throw in John Quincy Adams and Andrew Jackson for good measure. You notice that I've just mentioned Presidents 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Hamilton died young. He unfortunately, he unfortunately made enemies who were extremely powerful, extremely long-lived, and eloquent. And so Hamilton was very much defined not by himself, but by his enemies.
He was silenced by death. Nothing else could have shut him up.
He was silenced by death. I'm sure had Hamilton lived, he would have written the most voluminous memoirs of all time.
To get into the notion of how you get to the family of Hamilton and his personal life, it starts right in the first chapter. In fact, on page 1, and it talks about his wife who survived him for many, many years.
50 years.
And she's in the front parlor of the house that she now shared with her daughter. Eliza Hamilton, into this house, had crammed the faded memorabilia of her now distant marriage. When visitors called, the tiny, erect, white-haired lady would grab her cane, rise gamely from a black sofa embroidered with a floral pattern of her own design, and escort them to a Gilbert Stuart painting of George Washington. She motioned with pride to a silver-white cooler tucked discreetly beneath the center table that had been given to the Hamiltons by Washington himself. And she frequently grew melancholy during these tours and longed for a reunion with her Hamilton, as she invariably referred to him. Now, one of the reasons nobody else had Liza in their books about Hamilton is that they couldn't find anything because she threw away everything she wrote or burned it or whatever.
Yeah, I was immediately fascinated by the story of Eliza Hamilton because she was so self-effacing that she edited herself out of all previous biographies. I decided that I would edit her back in. And here's a woman. She lives for another 50 years after the duel. She dies age 97 in 1854, which means that, and she was in Washington, D.C. in her last years, that the widow of Alexander Hamilton would have passed on the street a congressman named Abraham Lincoln, and I was fascinated by the overlap of those eras. And so I introduced the book with Eliza as a very old woman recollecting, because I thought that it would cast a very sort of rich and tragic glow over this this story, to initially see Hamilton through the lens of this adoring
I think it does that, and I think it's an absolutely fantastic way to start a book on Alexander Hamilton. Yeah. His first son was Philip.
Philip, that's right.
And this is the way Alexander Hamilton, always prolix, as we said the last time we talked together, described his son Philip at the age of 7 months. It is agreed on all hands that he is handsome, his features are good, his eye is not only sprightly and expressive, but it is full of benignity. He's 7 months old, he's full of benignity. I never had that, at 72. His attitude in sitting is by connoisseurs esteemed graceful, and he has a method of waving his hand that announces the future orator. He stands, however, rather awkwardly. 7 months, what does he want? And his legs have not all the delicate slimness of his father's. If he has any fault in manners, he laughs too much. 7 months!
I'm glad you read that, because it shows that Hamilton had a sense of humor, not his most notable play.
That's
but
true.
It's a delightful, whimsical description of this show. And proud.
Oh, proud. Yeah. My goodness gracious. It went terribly proud. And I want to continue in the last segment about his relationship with the son, the son's tragic ending. And this is a great book, and he's a great man. And after we talk about his son, I want to talk a little bit about whether Hamilton's life has any relevance to our times today.
Mm-hmm. You're listening to Conversations on the Coast with Jim Foster. Now you can find this program on iTunes, SoundCloud, and all your favorite digital outlets. Follow the show on Twitter at JimFosterCoc and email JimFosterCoc@gmail.com.
Alexander Hamilton is what we're talking about on Conversations on the Coast. That's the name of the book. Ron Chernow is the author, and it's a paperback book now, coming from Penguin. And John Steele Gordon, American Heritage Magazine, has this to say: Ron Chernow's altogether splendid full-scale biography is a weighty, it's still weighty, and meticulously researched tome of more than 800 pages. It nonetheless reads like a great historical novel because Chernow brings his essential characters to such vivid life. This is a life not only of Hamilton the politician, lawyer, and technocrat, but of Hamilton the man. So let's get it straight. We now have an 800-plus page book for a mere $18. It's meticulously researched, but reads like a great historical novel. It is clearly the book that you all must buy.
I wholeheartly agree.
It's on the gift list. It's on the gift list.
Must reading.
One of the things that to get back to Philip Hamilton, in a precursor way, he dies by duel. Also in New Jersey, Jersey City, or the present Jersey City, not Weehawken.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But they're very close together.
Mm-hmm.
And what had happened is that he got into a kind of an imbroglio at a theater.
Theater, right.
A theater. With a fellow by the name of George I.
Acre.
And they had a little dust-up in the theater, and then they went to a tavern, and it continued. And the reason there was a dust-up was that Philip thought that Mr. Aker had insulted his father.
Right.
So they have a dust-up in the tavern, and the gauntlet is thrown, and it is accepted. And one of the things that you bring up here is, what is Alexander going to do about this? And he believed Hamilton was trapped in a dilemma that later plagued him with Burr. He believed in rebuking insults to one's integrity and abiding by the gentlemanly code of honor, but he grew increasingly critical of dueling as he returned to the religious fervor of his youth. What had happened that he is going back that way?
Well, the religious fervor?
Yeah.
I think it really was because of the French Revolution, which he saw as atheistic, and he thought that if the American Revolution took that turn, that the country would be doomed. Hamilton, like all of the founders, thought that religion was the basis of all law and all morality. They were not strict church-going men for the most part, but there was a deep underlying faith in the need for religion.
Let's cut to the chase here. Aker lifts his pistol, and Philip does likewise. Aker then shot Philip above the right hip, the bullet slashing through his body and lodging in his left arm. And when this news was brought to Hamilton, the father, he was so much overcome by his anxiety that he fainted and remained some time in the doctor's family before he was sufficiently recovered to proceed. And then Philip dies.
That's right. So Hamilton's son dies in a duel 2.5 years before he himself dies in a duel. Uncannily similar circumstances. The dueling ground is very near the dueling ground where Hamilton would die. Actually, it was the same set of pistols. Also, the son, like the father, will waste his shot. That is, he will show his bravery by going out to the dueling ground, will simultaneously show his principled objection to dueling by firing into the air. And in both cases, the other person will not return the favor. The other person will return the fire.
Yeah.
And the first bullet is mortal, both with Philip Hamilton and then with his father, Alexander.
Two things beyond that happen. One, his daughter Angelica
goes mad. Yeah, she's never right in the mind again.
Yeah, and then Hamilton tumbles into a bottomless despair. Though no stranger to depression, he had never lapsed into the lethargy that usually accompanied it. No matter how grief-stricken in the past, he still pumped out papers and letters with almost mechanical ease. Now the well-oiled machinery of his life ran down. And it's terrible, I would think.
It's a sad story. I mean, I think the people reading the book will have the same impression that I had writing it, which is first 3/4 of this life, it's a heroic story. Hamilton goes from strength to strength.
Yeah.
And then there's a tragic dying fall where his judgment goes awry. As Hamilton eloquently says, the shadows thicken around us as we get older. You could sense that even though he was in his late 40s, that the shadows were most definitely thickening around him.
Well, Ron, one of the things that your book has done for me, and I suggest it'll do it for anybody who reads it, that they will now have a favorite founding father. Alexander Hamilton, the title of the book. Ron Chernow, the author. This has been Conversations on the Coast, and I'm Jim Foster.
Now you can find this program on iTunes, SoundCloud, and all your favorite digital outlets. Follow the show on Twitter at Jim Foster COC and email jimfostercoc@gmail.com.